let's just sew whatever. Okay, so I like to use 1/2 inch wide leather tape. This is from wawac.com. I say Wawac, but it's Wowick? Maybe it's Wowick? I don't know, guys. Link in the description box. Okay. Some double-sided tape down the center. We're going to peel that off. Whoops. Look up. And then fold that in towards the center. And these are 3/4 inch wide handles. You can make this with 1 inch wide as well if you would prefer. This pattern was written for you to just kind of have fun with different hardware. And, you know, just have a nice, easy-going pattern. All right, so now we are ready to top stitch these handles. You're going to want to sew along all 4 sides. I like to start on the side that gets folded in. So the open-ended side, I guess, open fold side. Just go in. One handle down, put this other one down. Okay, so your handles are done. Go ahead and attach our strap connectors next. We're going to want our main panels for this and our strap connector pieces and hardware. Okay, so again, I like to use double-sided tape. Just straight down the center. And then we're gonna fold the long sides in. There we go. All right, and then I'm gonna grab another piece of double-sided tape for each one. Kind of tape it lower than the center by a little bit. And then unpeel, slide your strap connector through and fold that under. So these are just like the strap connectors on my Emily tote bag, if you've ever made that pattern. They're very standard, very simple. You could actually use literally any strap connector that you wanted though. This bag can serve as like a blank canvas for you. Who is Blake? And why is he a canvas? Okay. And then where to connect these, or I should say where to attach these on your bag is written on your pattern piece as well as in the pattern. So you can refer to that. I will go ahead and add one last piece of double-sided tape. If you have a domestic sewing machine that does not do well with your double-sided tape or leather tape, you can use 1/4 inch wide instead, and then you'd be less likely to be sewing through it. You could also just rivet these on if you wanted and sew them before kind of taping them together. Or I don't know. Those are my suggestions. I have no others. So I don't know what to tell you. Okay, so I'm going to peel off the backing tape and get my measurements going. Lay them on the bag and repeat. And this is a 14 by 4 inch ruler that I like to keep near my sewing machine just because it's small and I can lay out strap connectors and whatnot and have it close by. All right, so now I'm just going to sew these on with a box stitch around using a stitch length of 4.5 or 5. Just going slow, pivoting. And then I'm using this thread zapper to burn my excess thread, but you could also just clip it nice and close. Okay, this one moved a little bit. I want to make sure it's on there nice and straight. I make a ton of this bag style. I thought it was a little too simplistic to make a pattern for, but a lot of you guys begged me to, and I was like, well, okay, I may as well. Why not? Okay, so I am just going to repeat those steps with the opposite side. Okay, moving on to the next step, we are going to add a zippered pocket to the lining. I'm going to go ahead and add it to the piece without the excess bottom pieces. So the shorter one would be a less wordy way of saying that. I'm folding each piece, taking one of the lining pocket pieces, folding that in half, folding both in half. I'm going to mark a 7-inch box, 1 inch from the top on the wrong side here. Okay. And then I'm laying this piece 2 inches from the top center. And so, oh no, 2.5. Is it? You know, you'd think I'd know. Yeah, 2.5. Try that. Honestly, this doesn't matter a whole lot. You could just lay it down wherever seems good to you. Just make sure it's centered. And I do that by folding and lining up those creases. I'm going to set my stitch length to a 4.5 or a 4. Gonna back stitch at the beginning of that line. Go forward and back stitch. And just repeating those steps. You can also sew a box around completely if that works for you. This works better for me. And then I'm going to cut this open 1/2 inch from the outside of the box. I'm going to cut in and make a V shape. And you want to cut right next to, but not through your thread. And then I'm going to turn this so that it is wrong sides together instead of right sides together. And press using an iron with lots of steam. I'm using waterproof canvas for my lining, so I did not use any interfacing. And you'll want to make sure you use a lot of steam and don't lay your iron on top of it for very long. So now I'm going to attach my zipper. I also like to press my zipper a little bit before attaching. I am using zipper by the yard, so I've cut this piece to 10 inches so that it's in the seam allowance of this zipper pocket and you can't see it from the lining side. If you need to, you can use tape to help you hold your zipper in place, or like a glue stick, something like that, or even pins, whatever works for you. I'm going to start with a back stitch at that top corner, work my way down. As you get close to your zipper pull, just kind of slide it out of the way, continue on, back stitch, stitch more, and then I'm going to use my thread zapper to get rid of those threads, exterior, and then we'll add our other lining piece, right sides together. I'm going to clip from the back side, lay this face up, and then you're going to sew in a U shape starting at the bottom on the right side. And just kind of pivot. And then make sure you're back stitching at the start and stop. I'm going to trim this down. And then what I like to do is fold this under and press with my iron, and then we're ready to move on to the next step. So I am using zipper by the yard. I've cut my zipper to 16 inches and added a single zipper pull. So I've also cut these zipper tabs as directed by the pattern. What I'm going to do is attach them now. So I'm using about a 1/4 inch seam allowance to sew the vinyl on to the end of my zipper. So my zipper is face down, zipper teeth down. Trimming my excess threads. And then I'm going to fold this under, covering my last stitch and top stitch. You can also use double-sided tape for this if you want. This method is really only going to work well with vinyl. If you used fabric, you'll want to fold your zipper tabs first. So they'll be a little bit smaller if you use these measurements, but that's totally okay so long as the ends of your zipper are covered. You don't want your zipper pull flying off your bag. That would not be good. All right. I like to clip all of my extra little threads. And then if your zipper seems a little bit wonky in places, go ahead and iron it with some steam so long as it's nylon and not a plastic molded zipper. That would be bad. If you're using a metal zipper, that's okay. Just make sure you don't touch the teeth after you iron it, because again, that would be bad. Okay, so I'm now going to attach my zipper to the exterior. what we're gonna do is lay our zipper face down on the top of the fabric, top of the exterior fabric. I am clipping it in place after I have centered it. I centered it by eye, but you could do it by like folding them and whatnot. You're going to have about 1 inch from each end if that helps you center it. And I'm going to base this in place. So just 1/8 of an inch from the outside edge, if that. All the way down. Okay. And then we're gonna grab one of our lining pieces, it does not matter which one, and lay that face down. So we've got a zipper sandwich. Make sure that your notches in the bottom panel are all facing away from the zipper, basically. Okay, I'm gonna flip this over and I'm going to sew at 1/4 inch seam allowance now. So past your existing seam allowance. And as I'm getting close to the beginning, I'm gonna lift up my foot, leave my needle in, and pull my zipper pull away so that it doesn't mess up, basically. Okay. And then we're going to top stitch. So there's 2 different ways you could do this. If you prefer to top stitch through your lining fabric so everything stays in place, you're going to want to leave 1/2 inch from the end untop stitched. If you don't want to top stitch your lining, you can top stitch all the way through. So this is the way the pattern is written. So you want to fold your zipper seam, this seam back here, down towards the bottom exterior, and then fold your zipper towards your lining. And we're just gonna top stitch all the way. I'm using a stitch length of 5 to top stitch. And you can see how my zipper is kind of wanting to fold down to the exterior fabric. We want to roll that seam back in our hands underneath as we top stitch. About 1/8 of an inch from that top edge through everything. All the way down and back stitch. Bring that off. And then you can press your lining down, but you'll kind of find that it wants to just sit along that seam nicely anyway. So then we're going to repeat this and add our other exterior panel. What I like to do is line up the side edge and clip, and then flip it over to baste my zipper in place. At this point, I'm not even clipping it. I'm just gonna kind of move it as I sew. Whoops, what is that I feel? Oh, make sure you've got your hardware folded down so you don't sew through it, like I almost did. And don't pull on your zipper too much. That's kind of how you get a wonky zipper. Just kind of let it rest as well as you can. Okay, so zipper basted in place. Lay your other exterior lining panel on top and clip it. And then I'm going to flip it over. I've got my zipper pull at the very beginning here. So what I want to do is unzip it first, about 3 to 4 inches. Lay everything back together and then sew that on. And then I can feel I'm getting close to my zipper pull, so I'm going to leave my needle in the fabric, lift up on the foot, and then pull up on that zipper. And then I can continue to sew this in place. And what I'm doing with my fingers here is I'm feeling for my zipper tape, the teeth of my zipper, so that I don't sew through them. Because that would be bad. So then what we're gonna do is top stitch through this again. Your lining panels should be touching each other, and then you're gonna fold open your already top stitched exterior panel. And then fold down on your seam here so that you create this nice lip. So this can be a little complicated, but again, you wanna make sure that you can see all 3 other pieces of your fabric on the left side, or whichever way works for you, just not under your foot or needle. So back stitching. And you can rub your finger along this seam here to make sure you've got a nice lip of fabric. Voila! You've got your exterior zipper attached. To attach the bottom panel, we are going to lay it right sides together along the bottom of the bag. If you've got a little overhang on your exterior fabric, that's okay. Mine is about 1/4 of an inch. No, not a quarter, it's about 1/8 of an inch, and that's just a little bit of cutting error on my part. I cut by the pattern pieces, not the measurements for this one, so I'm not the most careful when it comes to that. So I'm just sewing next to the stabilizer, not through it, and I have added duct tape to protect the purse feet from, honestly, I don't know if this will make it last longer, but it will save my hands when I'm turning the bag not to cut it on the purse feet, because I've done that way too many times lately, and frankly I'm tired of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and use a stitch length of 5 to top stitch through that side seam. If your machine cannot get through the layers, this is not a necessary step and you absolutely can skip it, but it does give it a little bit of, I don't know, pizzazz along the bottom, I guess. So we're gonna go ahead and repeat that with the other side. So I'm just laying it over to the other exterior panel, switching my stitch length back to about a 4.5, moving my lining fabric out of the way. And sewing next to, but not through, the stabilizer. Okay. Switching it back to a 5, I'm going to attempt to top stitch this other side. So what I'm gonna do is keep my zipper unzipped. I'm going to push this under. So you've got your zipper past your sewing machine foot, so my zipper is behind it. And then I'm able to just kind of go in and top stitch through the top opening of the bag. It's a nice wide opening, so there's plenty of space. Back stitch, and then just push it all under at the end. So not too bad, but if you feel like your machine isn't going to be able to handle that, you can skip it all together. And then we're going to put right sides together on the bag, lining up your exterior main panels first. And I'm just clipping it all the way down the side and at the bottom. And then the lining main panels, holding those together, I'm going to use a stitch length of 4 and a wider seam allowance in my lining. And then as I get close to the main zipper up here, I'm kind of making my seam allowance a little bit smaller, so closer to 1/2 inch. And you're gonna wanna sew next to, but not through, your zipper tab, if you use one. Back stitching at the end. And then you can wait until you're done, or you could go ahead and Trim your seam allowance down now to about 1/4 inch. Your lining and your exterior. Especially at your zipper so that those corners don't poke out in a weird way. And then we're just going to repeat that for the other side, matching up your exterior panels first. And then since I'm starting at my exterior, I want to keep that 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to sew next to but not through my zipper tab. And then as I get to my lining, I'm going to increase that seam allowance by a little bit. Back stitch at the end. And trim down my seam allowance. And then we're going to square the bottom and birth the bag. All right, so to square the bottom, you can see here we've got this little part that's left open. We're just going to flatten that down. Bring those sides together, clip, and then you're gonna sew next to your stabilizer. Starting at your existing stitch lines, I'm going to back stitch, sew forward, and then back stitch again at those existing stitch lines. And then repeat that with the other side. And then if possible, I like to open this side seam here so it's nice and flat. And then again, we're going to start where our existing stitch lines are. And then as I'm trimming the seam allowance down, I kind of just do it in a U shape along the bottom panel in between those stitch lines. So hopefully you can kind of see here that. Okay, so now we've got our lining left completely open in the bottom. I'm going to push the exterior of the bag through the lining so that everything is then right sides out. I like to leave it open this way because it's so much easier to turn if your hands get really sore like mine. Otherwise, you can just birth it through the zipper pocket. It's totally up to you. If you used foam on this bag, it's definitely going to be a little bulkier to turn as well. And then push on the exterior of the bag. This is why I like to cover up those purse feet so I don't scrape my fingers on them. Poke out the corners of the bottom of the bag. And then while you're here, you may as well poke out your top corners as well. So you're basically just going to push at that zipper tab if you added them. Get it nice and poked out. Okay. So now you want to make sure that your zipper is unzipped in your zipper pocket. And we're going to pull that lining through so that you can see in. And then we're going to grab the bottom of our lining and pull that through the zipper pocket. And the way this bag is made, it's a little confusing to sew the bottom together, but once you get it, it's not so bad. So I've pulled my lining completely through. There's one longer end and then there's the shorter end, but we can still see the notch that we made, this little part here that's longer. We're gonna line that up with the other side of our lining. You can clip it together, but I'm just going to put it under my sewing machine foot, back stitch. I'm still at a stitch length of 4. And then I'm just going to line these up and sew at about 1/2 inch seam allowance, all the way down. And they should line up pretty well. Back stitch. You can trim that down if you want, but I'm not going to. So this part here gets a little confusing because you might be used to having 2 sides to the bottom panel. This one only has the one. So you're gonna close it up by pushing that seam all the way over and flattening it. Hopefully you can see that. It's basically just this opening shut, but you're not going to be lining up your threads. They're gonna be offset because it's flat. So starting at that side seam, stitch 1/2 inch seam allowance and all the way down. Of course I ran out of bobbin. It's kind of at perfect timing, but not quite. So we'll go ahead and redo that back stitch with a fresh bobbin. Perfect timing, so I'm not mad. So I'm just pulling my main thread back through. And hopefully you guys can see that this bag lasts through a single bobbin fairly well. All right, and we're just repeating that for the other side to close it up. Again, you're not going to be matching these side seams up. That wouldn't work. You're going to just flatten it out. Just kind of close that opening nice and flat, pulling in all your extra threads, and then sewing it at about 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then you can trim down your seam allowances and extra threads, but we're going to push this lining back inside the bag. And then before you close up your zipper, just kind of make sure that your bottom corners are all pushed out. You've got your top pushed out as much as possible. But everything looks pretty good. So we'll go ahead and close up this bottom of our bag. And then stick that inside itself. And then we're ready to rivet on our handles. Just giving everything final push. It zips up nicely. Okay, so here is a close-up of these handle connectors. You can see here there's a D-ring kind of on top. So what we're going to do is we're going to slide our strap through like you would normally. And then it goes through over that bar under the D-ring. It's kind of hard to do one-handed. Hold, please. Okay, I got it. So hopefully you can see it's underneath that D-ring, and then you can rivet. And actually, most rivet presses do fit through this hole here. So then when it's all attached, you've got your handle connector, and then underneath it is a D-ring where you can attach a snap hook. So we're gonna go ahead and rivet our handles on. And then that is it for making this bag. I hope you guys enjoyed this short little video. This is a great little pattern for beginners, people who are starting to play with new materials, want to try something new, but aren't sure that they can handle more complicated designs. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.